I like physically imposing women. Taller, stronger, with a history of violence. And that's just my type. So when this ad showed up on my radar...
Well, Ethan Winters. There you are.
Needless to say, I was hooked. As a longtime fan of Resident Evil, I was already gonna buy whatever crap they shoveled out. However, the promise of an evil Amazonian vampire lady thrust it to the top of my list. The game was released recently and, well, I've been playing. Just a little bit. Listen, I'm not a game reviewer. You can tell this by the fact that I have completed the game before I absolutely destroy it with facts and logic. I took time to get the whole picture before I complained. I read all the documents, I shot all the goats, I took all the creep shots of Dimitrescu, okay? I know this game forward, back, and blindfolded. This review is coming from a place of love for a company and franchise I have always been a fan of. I'm making this in an effort to present my constructive criticism to Resident Evil 8 Village. There may be some light spoilers throughout this review. You've been warned. All that being said, Resident Evil 8 is aggressively average. To rapidly sum everything up, Resident Evil 8 is Legend of Zelda meets Far Cry, starring Van Helsing. Let me explain. The map is divided into 5 sections interconnected by a hub world that is mostly safe. The village is the hub world, and after you survive the first attack, you'll only ever encounter a total of 15 enemies in the village throughout the 5 times you must navigate the village. To the north is Castle Dimitrescu, where you navigate the first dungeon, Castle Dimitrescu. To the northwest is Bienvento Manor Grounds. Here the dungeon is Bienvento Manor. To the southwest is the fishing village, and the dungeon here involves controlling water levels. Great. To the northeast is the slaughterhouse and fortress. One is an optional encounter, while the other is your dungeon, the werewolf den. Finally, to the far west is the factory, a dark and claustrophobic dungeon that will test all of your skills. I can't help but be reminded of Zelda by this map layout. As for the Far Cry, well, not only does the protagonist find himself semi-helpless in a place that's a far cry from home, wink wink, but let me just show you a side-by-side early game stage of RE8 and an early stage of Far Cry 3.
I respect that. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds.
Let's see what you're doing. Ethan Winters.
Get ready. No way! 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Jesus Christ!
That's right. Run for your life.
Also, the sheer amount of abuse Ethan's hands suffer reminds me of the Far Cry healing animations. As for Van Helsing, it's pretty obvious. The monsters are lichens, ghouls, Frankenstein monsters. The big baddies are loosely based off iconic horror figures, Dracula, Dr. Frankenstein, mermen/kappas/creatures from the lagoons, possessed dolls, and phantoms. To their credit, they do present all of these monsters in a very Resident Evil way that feels organic to the lore. World building. Resident Evil 8 is set in Eastern Europe, but we'll get to that. It's clear from the immediate opening cutscene, the developers wanted this game to have somewhat of a storybook feel to it, like the Brothers Grimm come to life. And to that end, they absolutely nailed it. The whole world feels like a Disney kingdom after an outbreak of a deadly bioweapon. Imagine Beauty and the Beast mixed with The Walking Dead, and that's the aesthetic they were going for. Almost every aspect of the world lends itself to that aesthetic. And the little things that I really like. At one point in the game, you'll encounter locks whose code is a date. One lock needs Ethan's wedding anniversary as a code, and the other requires a village boy's 5th birthday date. Ethan's anniversary is written in the American Standard, month, day, year, while the village boy's code is in the European format, day, month, then year. It's a very small detail, but it's one that really helps sell me on the idea that Ethan is a fish out of water. The monsters of the world follow the old Resident Evil formula of diseases and parasites taking over humanity. In Resident Evil 8, the Cjaones parasites are behind it. The Cjaones is a nematode raised in the same mold from Resident Evil 7. The interactions the Cjaones have varies between people. Those whose body cannot support the parasite become these ghoulish zombie-like beings. Those whose body can support the parasite but are not symbiotic become lichens of various forms. There are several types of lichens, which all look like different states of werewolf transformations, with the exceptions of two brothers who are some sort of were-yeti, also this giant who wandered down from Skyrim. Lastly, those who can support the parasite and form a symbiotic relationship will receive great powers from the Cjaones. You'll only ever encounter 5 people who had symbiotic relationships with the Cjaones: Dimitrescu, Bienvenido, Moreau, Heisenberg, and Miranda. Here's where the world building falls short. The game is set in Eastern Europe. Of these characters, 2 are Romanian, 1 is German, 1.5 is Italian, and 1 is French. Listen to this clip and see if you can tell who is from where.
The man is of no real use to anyone else, and my daughters do so love entertaining foreigners. Furthermore, I can assure you if you entrust the mortal to House Dimitrescu, my daughters and I shall deliver to you the finest.
Way ugly! I want to see! He's awake!
Both of you shut the fuck up!
What? Where?
You mean you'll screw around with him in private, and where's the fun in that? Give him to me, and I'll put on a show that everybody can enjoy.
Ugh, so gauche. What do we care for bread and circuses? The man-thing's suffering is assured.
Yak, yak, as a man's dick is cut off in the castle, blah, blah, blah.
I've heard all your arguments. Some of you were less persuasive than others, but I've made my decision.
And now, let me play this clip again with enhanced audio and location-appropriate dialects.
The man is of no real use to anyone else, and my daughters do so love entertaining foreigners. Furthermore, I can assure you, if you entrust the mortal to us, Dimitrescu, my daughter and I shall deliver the finest cuts of the slaughtered love.
Hey, yo, he's awake, hey! Oh,
Both of you, hot small! You mean you'll screw around with him in private? Where's the fun in that? Give him to me, and I'll put on a show that everyone can enjoy. Oh, so, gosh, and what do we care for bread and a circus, huh? The man thinks suffering is assured, regardless. If a man's dick is cut off in a castle, blah, blah, blah. I've heard all arguments. Some were less persuasive than others, but I've made a decision.
My favorite example of this has to be...
Outsiders, you're gonna get us all killed!
Quiet, Anton. He helped Leonardo and Elena.
We were doing fine by ourselves.
Please, Ethan, take a seat.
Is this all that's left? From your entire village?
All that's left? All that's left?
You meet the last surviving members of this village, and these Yankee-sounding jokes have the audacity to call you an outsider. This is frustrating because in the village, possessing media from the outside world is punishable by death. It's been over 70 years since anyone in the village was allowed to commune with people not from the village. Listen, this is Resident Evil. You have to suspend some disbelief. However, Resident Evil 4 was set in Spain, and all the locals had Spanish accents.
I have only one very important question. You got a smoke?
Tenemos que irnos.
Resident Evil 5 was set in Africa, and they have an attempt at different accents.
You should do what you came here to do and go home.
Resident Evil 7 was set in Louisiana, and they have Louisiana accents.
Shut up and listen if you want to stay alive.
Do you see what I'm getting at? It's very weird that these Eastern Europeans sound so Western. Speaking of regressions from Resident Evil 7, the gameplay. In between Resident Evil 7 and 8, Ethan has now received military training. which means Pansy McSoftboy from the previous game is dead. Now you're playing Chad Dickfist, certified badass with a camera for a face. If Resident Evil 7 asked the question, what if Resident Evil 1 was in first person? Well, Resident Evil 8 asks, what if Resident Evil 5 was in first person, minus the boulder punching? 7 was received as a return to the holy horror genre. Prior to 7, the franchise had become tired, and fans were complaining the franchise had become mostly action games. So, to see the direct sequel to 7 regress back to such an action-heavy story was a disappointment. Small changes are just as at fault as the larger ones. For example, in Resident Evil 7, the inventory and map screens did not pause the game. You just had to deal with your inventory in real time. Ammo was scarce, and enemies often made you opt to saving resources by avoiding encounters. This is not the case in Resident Evil 8. All maps and menus pause the game, ammo is abundant, and most maps are designed in a way that you can herd enemies and circle strafe them before they can hit you. So it's clear the developers wanted more action from this game than they did in 7. It even says in the concept art, they were trying to make this game feel like Resident Evil 4, which was arguably the point when the genre became less horror-centric. Taking all of that into consideration, the controls for this game are tight. Seriously, this game is a great shooter. My only real complaint is the lack of true iron sights. If you're familiar with games like Left 4 Dead or Call of Duty Zombie Mode, you're gonna do well in this combat. Most rooms allow you to keep enemies at a distance with objects between you two. Shooting makes sense and is very forgiving. When you zoom in on an enemy, you shoot exactly where the dot is. However, when the reticle blooms, you might think that your accuracy has decreased. It hasn't. Whenever the reticle blooms, it hit scans whatever is inside the bloom, so as long as there's an enemy in the cross, you won't miss a shot. A well-timed block will allow Ethan to punch a werewolf in the face, so that's cool. There are a few issues I have, though. There are times where movement can feel slippery. There's also a lot of little decorative objects you can get stuck on. It's pretty frustrating to be having a near-perfect run only to get stabbed because your ankle got stuck on a book. The attaché case makes a return, as does the merchant system. Kill baddies, find treasure, sell stuff, buy guns, upgrade guns. It's a gameplay loop that requires no explanation. The crafting system makes a return. Crafting items no longer take up inventory space. Herbs, gunpowder, piles of metal, what have you, they're all stored in a 4-dimensional pocket of holding. The game also brings back the character upgrade system. No more multicolored herbs or steroids. This time it's food. Bring the in-game merchant animal meats will unlock you character upgrades. You don't need all the components on hand. As you acquire them, you can leave them with the merchant, so they're not taking up space in your inventory. Something that really irritates me in this one is that my mouse and menu controls always seem to fight each other. In Resident Evil 7, your mouse cursor does nothing until you click, while in Resident Evil 8, your mouse cursor always takes priority over keyboard controls. It can get annoying. Also, you move the map with your scroll wheel, and the F key is the accept key as opposed to E. These are little annoyances I can adapt to, but they're not my favorite. The puzzles in this game feel exceptionally easier than previous games, with the exception of Dmnt Manor. Most of them just require examining what you find and backtracking until you unlock a room with enemies. Unfortunately, you can find the solution to most puzzles in the same room. There are a small handful of head-scratchers that did make me feel accomplished after figuring it out. This is all made real easy by the inclusion of Luigi's Mansion's room system. A room you've never entered will be gray, a room with items will be red, and a room that has been fully looted and exploited will be blue. A helpful and welcome change for completionists everywhere. The game does have plenty of scary moments. There are places that will fill you with unease, and at the beginning you will feel fairly helpless. It doesn't take long for you to turn into a certified action movie hero, but the game does a decent job at pacing that out. The last third of the game puts you in a very claustrophobic space that makes it exceedingly difficult to keep enemies at bay, as well as 3 points where the game takes all of your overpowered weapons just so it can stand a fair chance. Overall, it's not that steep of a difficulty slope. If you can survive the game for an hour, you're ready for everything it's about to throw at you. Which is one of my bigger issues, the difficulty. In Resident Evil 7, the highest difficulty is Madhouse. In Madhouse setting, not only are you easier to kill and the enemies more tenacious, The puzzles themselves have also been changed, and so did the location of items on the map. This is not the case in Resident Evil 8. Resident Evil 8's Village of Shadows mode is almost exactly the same as the other difficulties. The only changes are tougher enemies, and literally 2 sections that have additional enemies. Everywhere else is exactly the same, including enemy spawns. And this was a real shame. I would have really loved a proper remixed main story. Going back to Resident Evil 7, when you go to Lucas's area, you have to get the door code. Now, if you do everything the game wants you to, the code is always the same. However, if you try to be cheeky and enter the code without Ethan actually knowing the code, the game will instead change the code to a random string, so you're forced to do Lucas's test. In Resident Evil 8, the codes are always the same, so you can skip several stages of gameplay by metagaming with outside information. This could be because some puzzles are story dependent, things like Ethan's anniversary as a code while he's being tormented over his dead wife. Welcome to Spoiler City. From this point on, I will be dropping heavy spoilers. Skip to this timestamp if you want to avoid spoilers. In Resident Evil 8, you play Ethan Winters. Take notes, boys. This is what a real man looks like. The game begins with Mia reading her infant daughter a psychotic fairy tale that's not appropriate for an infant. I don't know why Ethan is surprised by this. She literally lied to him for years and is a known associate of bioterrorists. Obviously not Mother of the Year. After putting Babby to bed, Ethan and Mia sit down to a nice hot plate of democide. Mia is shot in cold blood and Chris Redfield is to blame. Ethan gets an Al-Qaeda escort and finds himself in a car wreck on a snowy road. Ethan proceeds down the road while sounds of horrors surround him, just outside your field of view. This section feels similar to the beginning of Resident Evil 7, and I feel it symbolizes Ethan returning to his unresolved past. Stumbling upon a strange village that looks like a war zone, Ethan does the sensible video game protagonist move and begins breaking and entering into homes. In an M. Night Shyamalan twist, home invasion somehow found Ethan on the business end of a super soaker. As a show of international hospitality, Ethan is gifted a Nerf N-Strike Elite before his new friend is raptured off to heaven. Ethan's playdate soon turns to horror as the whole village falls under siege to an army of furries and Reddit moderators. With the power of God and anime on his side, Ethan manages to distribute enough freedom to survive the attack. Ethan then meets Grandma Sparkle, who realized she left the oven on and locks Ethan inside the village square. Ethan then meets some villagers who are still fully not unalived. He learns of other survivors and tries to help them. In exchange for all this help, Ethan gets told his kind ain't welcome here. So Ethan does the reasonable thing and steals an elderly woman's truck while her house burns down. Making his way downtown, walking fast, the corpses pass, Ethan enters the gatehouse to the castle and is stopped by the German antagonist, Karl Heisenberg. Ethan fails his first test when he refuses to give Karl any of his croissants. Since sharing is caring and Ethan broke the rules, Karl brings Ethan to Mama Miranda for a timeout and spanking. All the other grown-ups are present and they decide that since Ethan has so much energy, he should probably go outside. While playing in the yard, Ethan meets a proper thick boy. Ethan knows not to talk to strange men in carts offering candy, but Ethan is still mad at Mother Miranda, so he decides that he'd rather be kidnapped than live in this home anymore. Unfortunately, to Ethan's dismay, the Duke is not a kidnapper, but instead, this mountain of a man is the main mission's meaty merchant. He sells medicine, cooks food, will upgrade your guns, and provide you with a comforting yet familiar sense of capitalism. Entering the castle, Ethan is encountered by the goth GF's most view people deserve. These beautiful ladies are the daughters Dimitrescu. They're named after famous actors who played Dracula. They want to murder you, and they're not actually girls, but millions of flies in a girl's suit. The daughters Dimitrescu drag you to one of Mama's rooms, the queen herself, Alcina Dimitrescu. 9 feet tall, 300 pounds of Amazonian vampire ready to chew your flesh. What a woman. Am I right, gang? Unfortunately, she is what we call an unrealistic expectation of female beauty. Real women generally are not 9 feet tall, and the cannibalistic ones never advertise it. It turns out Lady Dimitrescu wants to eat Ethan as badly as I'd like to eat her. Instead of doing anything about it right now, Ethan is left hanging by his hands. Typical tease. I bet she wouldn't have made Alpha Chris Redfield wait. After Miss Michigan and the runner-up receive some minor surgery, Ethan is free to putz around the castle and look for his daughter. Did I mention he's looking for his infant daughter? Because he's looking for his infant daughter. It's not too important though, because she's dead, all of her limbs are floating in jars, and frankly, I have more important things to do. Namely, vandalism. Ethan's journey to break all the pots and windows comes to a halt when one of those goth fetish models decides that no means yes and tries to take some Ethan. Being the manly man that Ethan is, he runs away from the tiny lady and falls into the basement. It's down here that I learn what my love is into. You should see what this woman is into. Capcom really checked my search history making this game. In her basement, you'll find all sorts of cruel and painful BDSM equipment. Also a bunch of unimportant information about young girls being unalive to make babies. Just kill the zombie walkers and move on. Inside the kitchen is where enough is enough. Ethan, finally sick of these daughters not taking no for an answer, gives them a harsh spanking with a hot pole. What does that mean? He shot them until their living proceeded to not living.
What have you done to my daughter?
Lady Dimitrescu learns about the death of her daughters, and instead of perceiving it as me, proving that she's the only one for me, she perceives it as some sort of affront against her family. She starts acting like I killed her child or something, and begins to freak out by cutting off Ethan's hands. Ladies, am I right, fellas? Must be that time of the year. Navigate away from her, get your hand back, steal some lady's face, and perform this one trick that doctors hate. Boom, you're free. Kinda. From this point on, Lady Dimitrescu fills the role as a nemesis type. She's totally unkillable and will constantly stalk you throughout the castle. Thankfully, she's slow enough to outrun and is really only a danger in tight corridors. Just deliving 2 more daughters, steal 4 more masks, rob the place stupid, and you'll be ready to leave the castle. Ethan tries to leave the castle, but Dimitrescu says maybe not and turns into a dragon. That might sound weird, but remember, she's based off of Dracula, whose name translates to Lord of Dragons. Do you know what Dimitrescu translates to? Son of Dimitri. Dimitri in Romanian meaning harvester, because she harvests people. Though, that only applies to the understanding that Dimitrescu is Romanian. She's probably Romanian, but the pronunciation Dimitrescu is the French pronunciation. If she's Romanian, it should be pronounced Dimitrescu. Again, the accents. Anyway, you kill the most beautiful woman to ever be thought up, and you grab some dusty jar. Spoilers, it's your infant daughter's decapitated head. That doesn't matter, okay? Nothing really matters anymore. I just killed the woman I loved, and from this point on, my life becomes a hollow existence without her. You go back to the village and Bootylicious tells you something cryptic. You explore the parts of the village you didn't have access to before and find a key. Bring that key back to Tons of Fun, and he tells you that's actually your daughter in that jar. Also, this guy seems to know the merchant from Resident Evil 4.
What are you buying? Just something an old friend of mine used to say.
The fact that this merchant is on the Lady Dimitrescu's guest list, isn't bothered by lichens, and has been in contact with people from the Plagas incident makes me believe he isn't wholly human. His sheer girth and skin color makes me think he's already injected with some sort of Plaga or K2 himself. Maybe another symbiotic character who decided not to join in on the world domination. Take that key to the north and enter the second area of the game, Silent Hill. Walk through the fog, daunt your dead wife, feed the door beast precious memories, and now you can enter Bienvenido Manor. Inside the manor is one big missed opportunity. This whole area is the most empty section you come across. I get that it's supposed to go along with the whole phantom shtick of Lord Donna. I just wish the devs used this space to dump some lore or something about Donna and Angie. Though I suppose it adds to the mystery. Regardless, this whole manor is empty aside from some interesting paintings. Go into the basement, take the can of baby with the ease of stealing candy from a baby, lose your guns, play a game of Operation with your puppet wife. This puzzle actually got me. I won't tell you how to solve it because you deserve to suffer for your sins. Let's just say it's a real head scratch. Ask the totally not sex doll what that mouth do. Display your dead wife's private footage on a big screen. Cut open the waifu. Go through the obligatory Ringu reference. Learn the dangers of 16th trimester abortions. Grab the fetus card. Tell the kids to turn off the damn lights and stop touching your thermostat. Tell your precious mistake that you need to pick up some cigarettes. Dodge child support like a professional and take the elevator back to the bachelor life. Upstairs, you meet a single mother living alone with 60 dolls. Despite the obvious red flags, Ethan agrees to play hide and seek with her child. Ethan, being the kind of guy to bring a BB gun to a squirt gun fight, plays hide and seek with scissors. Give the tiny creature a faceectomy and Lord Donna has been defeated. Trying to leave the mansion prompts several encounters with more infected as you traverse through the gardens and graveyard. If you make it back to the notorious B.I.G. and decide to head back to the manor, Todd Howard blocks your path by sending a giant down from Whiterun, so be warned. Back at the village, head south through the door. Meet the goodest boy. If the monsters who look like Reddit moderators are called lichens, then surely the warest of wolfies will be named... I won't try to pronounce that. Put Old Yeller out to pasture, shoot a bunch of snot, parkour off the wall, and hunt the pigs. The pigs are not dangerous. I just don't appreciate how they have the audacity to be alive after everything I've done for the Meals on Wheels Foundation. Taking the stairs into the windmill torture dungeon, you take a totally safe elevator into the mines. Down in the mines, you find some loser watching TV. This isn't just any loser. This is the third lord, Moreau. He's the French lord. You can tell he's French as he looks like the two most famous Frenchmen in history, Quasimodo and this bullfrog I found. He's a stand-in for mermen, kappas, and the creature from the Black Lagoon. Also, he kinda looks like Igor, the assistant to Victor Frankenstein. Ethan steals some pickled baby's feet and Moreau immediately surrenders and cries until his snot blocks your path. Find a family of lichens enjoying a picnic and proceed to ruin their day. Steal their boat just like AJ stole my Pokemon Red in 3rd grade. Screw you, AJ. Take a boat and find Chris. Chris is still too mysterious and brooding to be any help. The Frenchman bursts in and begins to unload about his mommy issues. Just tell that cheese-eating wino that you're a good American girl who thinks cigarettes are yucky, and he'll leave you alone. Get on top of the windmill and fall down into the water temple. Just keep running, raise the platforms, pull the lever, grab the Zora's Sapphire, and then drain the water. Now the Frenchie has devolved back into Tadpole. Just listen to his mommy issues, and then give him a healthy 357 tablet of Zoloft, and he'll leave you alone. Get yourself back in the village, follow the signs to Disney World, take a wrong turn in Albuquerque and have a second encounter with Todd Howard in his slaughterhouse. With a pocket full of meat, you're now ready to storm the werewolf fortress. Push forward through the lichens, teach them a valuable lesson. In the immortal game of hopscotch that is life, just like paper beats scissors, guns beat bow and arrows in 13 out of 27 encounters. 4 out of 5 dentists could not be bothered to substantiate this claim. The last one just got mad at me. With this information in mind, you're ready to— holy shit! Sorry, there was a zip line and it startled me. It's just, if you've never been on a zip line, then you're already better off than most. Okay, just save yourself the time. It is traumatically boring. After you have sufficiently bopped enough noses with newspapers, you'll be allowed to head into the basement where you meet Daddy. The first Hammer brother is more intimidating than he seems. Shoot his knees to drop him, shoot his head to stop him. Now, throughout the game, corpses of Kadu hosts often crystallize. So the next room you drop into is essentially a room made entirely of corpses. Loot their valuable crystal flesh, take a relaxing gondola ride into the catacombs, and then take the ladder into the graveyard. Be sure to grab the last can of baby gravy before you go. Once topside, head back to Lord Chungus and stuff your dead infant daughter into a chalice. Put this 2-ton rock goblet into your pocket and walk 100 feet to the ceremony site. The surprise elevator will allow you to take the bridge to the factory. In the factory is where the real game begins. You again meet Carl Heisenberg, this game's stand-in for Dr. Victor Frankenstein. He sits you down and offers a truce. Ethan has seen at least over 3 episodes of Survivor and knows not to trust a truce. Ethan has a whole lot of problems when he's pushed into a Rancor pit and faces the first and last of Frankenstein's monsters. This one's name is Sturm, like Sturmgewehr. He has a propeller for a face and chainsaws for propellers. This is the most Resident Evil monster to date. 10 out of 10, too much water. Escape plain-faced Jane, and you find yourself deep into the factory. Almost immediately, you find the thickest of boys, always when you need him. Make sure to buy the SIG, because you're gonna need it for Frankenstein's monsters. This factory is full of corpses fused with metal and reanimated through science and electricity. You'll almost immediately find yourself in the foundry. You'll repeatedly come back here to forge keys. Go upstairs and grab the first foundry mold, and you'll meet the second Frankenstein's monster, Soldat 1. Shoot the fusion core in his chest until his soul leaves the power armor, then move on. Trying to make your way up to the second floor will lead you to an encounter with the third Frankenstein's monster, Soldat 2. Be firm and tell him no until you drill the point home. Shortly after that is a reunion with Edward Chainsaw Hands, who tries to tell you about their Lord and Savior Jimbus. Once on the second dungeon floor, the basement third floor, make your way into the mine. Make your way to the garbage chute and fight Jetpack Frankenstein. After a breezy near-death experience, you're now on the third dungeon floor, the second basement floor. Take a romantic elevator ride with Oh Lord He Comin' and go back to the foundry. With the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic official collector's key, you're ready to leave the dungeon. But not without meeting the fifth Frankenstein's monster, Panzer Soldat. With a handheld rapid glitter dispensement device, you can remove its clothes and turn off its life. Let's take a minute. This is the speaking voice of the guy who names his reanimated soldiers Sturm, Soldat 1, Soldat 2, and Panzer Soldat.
I said sit! Lady, supersized bitch. Ugly ass psycho doll. An moronic freak. Don't you get it? It's a test to see if you're strong enough to be a part of Miranda's family.
God, these accents stick out like a sore thumb. Once you open the exit door, you meet Sturm for the third and final time. However, since your last encounter, Gary Oak used HM10 to teach him Flamethrower. Keep moving, avoid his charge, roar, glare, and fire spin moves, then use your Egg-splosion attack on his stupid robot heart, and the encounter will be over. Also, this guy is supposed to be Heisenberg's dad, according to concept art. When you get to the top, Heisenberg is so mad that you broke all of his toys, so he puts on his big boy pants and has a tantrum. In the sub-basement, you again meet Chris Redfield, who has finally had a nap and went potty, so now he's ready to tell Ethan what exactly happened. Mia was a fake, Donald Trump was never real, and the Berenstein Bears made the game first person. Blah blah blah, exposition blah. This scene kinda sums up how Resident Evil games have been handled. On one hand, you have Chris explaining this tale of deceit and horror that has plagued Ethan. On the other hand, he's outfitting construction equipment with chainsaws and machine guns, caught in a perpetual state of wanting to be both Silent Hill and Duke Nukem. None of that matters though, because here is one of those points where the game tries to nerf you. If you have been consistent in upgrades, at this point you have some really strong weapons. Sucks to be you. You've got to get into this mini tank and fight a rejected transformer. I like how this line recognizes how absurd and over-the-top Resident Evil 5 was, while being delivered from a 100-foot-tall Magneto monster. Subtlety is Capcom's strong suit. Show Heisenberg what for until he gets mad and takes away your Titan. Now that the idiot has disarmed you of your mini-tank, you are now free to heal yourself and use your supercharged sniper rifle. Once Heisenberg lays down for his nap, Chris calls you to make plans for Saturday. Except, Mommy Miranda shows up to show you that not only is she your mother, she's also Grandma Sparkle and your wife. Which means that your daughter she stole and cut up is actually your sister, aunt, and daughter. This information causes Ethan to go into shock and die of heartbreak. Chris Snapchats some snuff photos to his friends, and this is where the real game begins. This Call of Duty section is fine, I guess. It's alright on lower difficulties, however, on Village of Shadows, it's insanely difficult. Chris's weapons are severely underpowered compared to what Ethan has. Just slog through the first-person shooter, use your 15 kill streak to call it an airstrike, jump down the hole, fight the second Hammer brother, call in a tactical nuke, proceed down into the cave. Chris throws some bombs at a fetus fungus and discovers that Mommy Miranda taught Oswald Spencer, the guy who started Umbrella Company, meaning she indirectly kicked off the events of the franchise. Inside Mommy Miranda's sweaty dungeon, you'll find Mia, who is disappointingly still alive. Mia drops a genuine bombshell and explains that Ethan died on the Annabelle in Resident Evil 7, and his body is actually like 70% mold. At this point, Ethan wakes up outside of Winterhold and learns that a little girl has been inside of him this whole time. Maybe the little girls inside of us were the treasure all along. Capcom is never afraid to ask the weird questions, because as long as they can ask these questions in-game, you'll never have to pay for employee mental health. Ethan wakes up in the back of Duke's cart and asks if any of that really just happened. Duke denies drugging and kidnapping Ethan in the vineyard and drops his limp body into the middle of a battlefield. Sell all your crap and get ready for the final showdown. Push through the last of the ghouls and enter Miranda's safe space. Miranda tries to use your daughter's body to resurrect her daughter, who is actually the little girl inside of you. Instead, your daughter eats her daughter inside the moldy womb and returns resurrected and unscathed. Ethan, upset that he now has to return to the responsibilities of fatherhood, begins to unload on Miranda. Miranda will turn into a bird, shoot her. Miranda will turn into a spider, shoot her. Miranda will turn off the lights, spin around and shoot everything. Miranda will fill up balls of gas and try to Kamehameha Ethan. Just shoot her in the balls and she'll stumble. In a nod to the final encounter with Evelyn, some mold roots tie you down and you're locked into a standoff with Miranda. Just keep shooting her in the face and then your game resolution will mysteriously go up to like 4K as the end game cutscene plays. A bunch of things happen that I won't go into and that's it. Game over. Post-game content. Beating the game unlocks the extra content shop where you can spend challenge points. Challenge points are obtained by completing challenges. Challenges range from melee-only runs to 1,500 kills, breaking all the windows, beating the game in under 3 hours, etc. By the way, I beat the game in 2 hours 2 seconds, so that's totally doable. And I'm imagining the glitchless speedrun record will be somewhere between 80 and 105 minutes with optimization. None of the challenges are secret, so you can just look them up in-game whenever. You've likely earned many on your first playthrough. In the shop, you can purchase concept art, figurines, in-game weapons, and oddities alike, such as the rocket pistol, or the lightsaber, scratch that, LZ Answerer. I thought it was weird for there to be a lightsaber in Resident Evil. However, Ethan has had his hands cut off so many times, I can't help but see it as a Luke Skywalker reference, especially since it's available in 3 colors, red, blue, green, with up to 2 blades. You can also purchase infinite ammo modes for all the weapons via the shop, and if you complete everything in-game, you can purchase everything in the shop and still have 10,100 points remaining. Inside the extra content shop, you may purchase the Mercenaries game mode, which I would like to nitpick just a little bit about. The original was called Mercenaries because it featured multiple characters. 3 of the 5 were actual sellswords, guns for hire, and soldiers of fortune. Ada, Krauser, and Hunk were genuine mercenaries. In this version, Ethan is the only character, so I don't really think the name applies. Titles aside, it's a fun little mode. It's an arcade shooter with 4 different levels based off the game and 2 difficulty settings. Each map has multiple rounds. Before rounds, you can purchase weapons and upgrades. This iteration brings perks. Throughout the map are blue orbs that grant a random perk such as double ammunition capacity or increased damage. The perks become a huge factor in how you approach each level, and they're a welcome addition to the game. Returning to the game is that industrial breakbeat track from the original Mercenaries. The music for Castle and Factory, on the other hand, doesn't quite fit the arcade feel of Mercenaries, but that's easily remedied. Just turn on the Doom Eternal soundtrack and start slaying monsters. Each level features a set number of enemy spawns. The enemies will always spawn when certain conditions are met, so replaying stages will allow you to memorize them to make them optimal. The second difficulty is where the real game begins. You're only allowed the starter pistol. The Magnum is available with only the ammunition in the chamber, and the grenade launcher sells for 50k. These stages will really test your patience. If you just push through though, and practice, you'll beat them in no time, and earning an SS rank on every stage unlocks the lightsaber in the content shop. Final score. Instead of giving this game an overall rating in some subjective format like out of 10, I'm gonna rate this game as to what I feel it's worth versus how much I spent. And after taking everything into consideration, sinking 60 plus hours into a 100% completion of the game, I feel Resident Evil 8 Village is worth $45 against the $70 I spent on the deluxe edition. If you're curious about this game, I would wait a few months for the price to go down. Try and get it on sale for around $40-50 and you're gonna be perfectly content. The thing is, this game is a great shooter, but it's just a meh Resident Evil. What it brings to the series are things that are pretty much industry standard for other genres. In a lot of ways, it just feels less like an expanded Resident Evil 7, but just a decent looter shooter with moderate horror and light RPG elements. I really enjoyed playing this game, but after finishing this review, I don't think I'll be coming back to Resident Evil 8 for a long time. Unlike Resident Evil 0, 4, and 7, which I return to almost annually. Moving forward, the beauty of modern games is that things can be repaired with updates. Here are some things that I'd like to see moving forward. Number 1, confirm DLC. At the moment, there is no DLC confirmed and there is no Season Pass available, which is a huge shame. The story has a lot of loose ends I would have loved to explore. Also, the advertising material spent so much time on Castle Dimitrescu, but in-game it's such a short encounter. Resident Evil 7 expanded on the lore through DLC minigames and alternate game modes. I would love to see Resident Evil 8 get the same treatment. PlayStation users had access to the Maiden demo, which is set in the dungeon of the castle and follows one of the maidens being sacrificed to create Dimitrescu's daughters. I would have really liked to have played this demo, as it had some lore hidden in it. If it was released as a DLC alongside other lost tapes, I'd 100% purchase them. I think an alternate game mode, like they did End of Zoe, Not a Hero, Assignment Ada, would be great, especially one that's more horror focused, perhaps something involving Mia's entrapment. Number 2, an updated Village of Shadows mode. I would really like it if they did a complete overhaul of the Village of Shadows mode, remix some maps, change up some puzzles, make the inventory and maps screen in real time as opposed to pausing the game. Just a few changes would make a playthrough on the hardest difficulty feel fresh and genuinely scary. Maybe even make crafting items take up space in the attaché case on the hardest difficulty. Like the fight with Angie and Donna, for example. Across all difficulty settings, there are only 5 hiding spots. She goes upstairs first, then either to the living room or dining room, then finally she goes to either the elevator or the foyer. The house is full of empty cabinets that could fit a doll, and honestly, it feels wasted. I wish Village of Shadows had 7 to 10 different hiding spots to really crank up the tension. As it stands, if you know where she hides, you can complete the fight in under 90 seconds without taking damage on the hardest difficulty. Village of Shadows was a huge letdown. Number 3, a frickin' crossbow! I know this is petty, but of all the Brothers Grimm and classic monsters in this game, there's no crossbows? They spent so much time on this Van Helsing setting, it just feels like a missed opportunity. I was really hoping completing the game would unlock maybe some sort of crossbow tipped with anti-fungal bolts or something. The typical overpowered post-game weapon you've come to expect from Resident Evil, but no such crossbow. Other than that, I can't think of anything that they could reasonably change to make this game better, because it sure ain't that multiplayer battle royale whatever thingy they forced on me. Maybe replace most of the voice actors. It's not really reasonable. I don't know. All that being said, I do like the game. It's not my favorite Resident Evil. It's my favorite Resident Evil for spicy reasons, but it's just not the best Resident Evil. I hope you folks enjoyed my review of Resident Evil 8 Village. I'm not a game reviewer, so I probably won't do this again. The franchise is just special to me. I don't know when I'll be back. I'm really struggling creatively. That being said, you people who are still watching my videos, I see your numbers, and I appreciate you. Shout out to the patrons who still continue to fund me, and thank you so much for watching. Au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, and adios.